Hi, I'm Mike Gilliam. Science and You starts now.
Anne Riddell. Have you ever wondered just how clean the water around New York is? Today we take you out with the researchers looking for the answer to that question. That's ahead on Science and You.
Hi, I am Marlene Peralta. Do you know there is a wildlife refuge the size of 10 Central Parks here in New York? I'll tell you where ahead on Science and You.
I'm Mike Gilliam. Oh, it's another hot one. And when it gets hot like this, a lot of people like to come out here and try to cool off just a little bit. And there's a movement out there to try to make sure that the waters are clean and clear for you, your kids, my kids, and their kids as well. I'm going to tell you all about that in just a minute on Science and You.
I'm Barry Mitchell. Where do you find the freshest seafood in New York? At a marine biology lab in Brooklyn College. We'll meet Dr. Martin Schreibman. He's a character. Ahead on Science and You.
I'm Greenberg at the New York International Auto Show. Electric cars are no longer just an idea for the future. They're here now. And before you know it, batteries are going to be powering a lot more than you can even imagine. That's ahead on Science and You.
Hey, I'm Lisa Beth Kovitz. What is in a kiss? We're going to take a microscopic look. Ahead on Science and You.
I'm Anne Riddell. If you've ever wondered just how clean the water around New York is, today you'll get some answers.
Riverkeeper to the Crystal Cutler, Newtown Creek Riverkeeper.
The waterways around New York are something of a second home for John Lipscomb. As captain of Riverkeeper's patrol boat, he spends plenty of time here.
We've done enough miles in 10 years to go around the globe 2 times at the equator.
My gosh, that's a lot of time out here.
It's a lot of time. And so you learn a lot. You know, you get these moments where the river is basically teaching you.
John has partners on the water in science, including assistant professor Greg O'Mullen from Queens College. Together, they study water quality, bringing different perspectives to a common goal.
John is not a scientist by training, but he's one of the best scientists that I know. He observes the system.
The whole idea is to be a presence on the river, witness for the river, eyes and voice for the river.
We'll glove up and take a sample over the side, and then it goes into a cooler. This is being analyzed.
Greg explains the scientific point of view.
The goal of this project is to understand the patterns of water quality, to identify sources of pollution that can be eliminated. We're testing for the influence of the human population on the waterways surrounding New York. The primary factor that we're concerned about is sewage contamination.
It's an issue the city is tackling, explaining New York, like other older urban areas, is serviced by a combined sewer system, meaning stormwater and wastewater are carried through a single pipe. And during heavy rain, the system can become overloaded, discharging a mix of that water into New York Harbor rather than getting all of it to treatment plants. Right now, the city's implementing a major effort to improve the harbor water quality, with plans that could result in more than $2 billion in green infrastructure over the next 20 years.
And what this is showing is a sample that has a lot of microbial growth.
Back in his lab, Greg analyzes samples looking for more information to understand how rainfall affects water quality. But he's quick to point out New York has much to be proud of.
We've got an environmental success story here in New York. If you look at the 30-year history, water quality has improved tremendously. So we're doing a lot of things right.
And there are things all of us can do to protect our water. For starters, conserve, use less of it. Also, keep hazardous materials and old medication out of the system. Think about what you're pouring in a sink or flushing down a toilet.
As a society, we have to start thinking about these waterways as members of our community, living creatures. You can't pollute the other side of the fence and escape it.
Though there's obviously room for improvement, researchers say there's also a lot to be proud of because the water here is cleaner than it used to be. The challenge for all of us is making sure that continues. I'm Anne Riddell for Science and You.
Hi, I am Marlene Peralta. We are at Jamaica Bay Wildlife Refuge, which is over 9,000 acres of salt marshlands, woods, water ponds, and upland fields. It is located in the heart of New York's metropolitan area, and it is also known as the best place in New York City to observe seasonal migration of birds.
This is an internationally renowned birding area, so there are many people that come here to observe, to enjoy birding, as well as photograph the birds that are here. There have been over 320 species that have been identified here. So some of them are here throughout the year. Some of them are here for a little vacation to get some food and some respite before they move either north or south. And then there are seasonal birds as well.
But birds aren't the only attraction.
There are trees, there are shrubs, wildflowers, different types of birds, songbirds, wading birds, raptors, as well as a variety of reptiles. That would include turtles and snakes, and then we also have amphibians, mammals. So there's a whole wide variety of different types of animals that you can find here, as well as plants.
Its origins go back to the 1950s, a development envisioned by Parks Commissioner Robert Moses. In 1972, the land was transferred to the National Park Service.
This is a site within Gateway National Recreation Area. Gateway is actually 26,000 acres large. It spreads across Queens, Brooklyn, Staten Island, and across 2 states, New York and New Jersey.
The refuge also serves as a research site for scientists working to address the water pollution problem in the disappearing marshlands.
Jamaica Bay, for example, has 4 wastewater treatment plants located on the shores of the bay. And each day, those plants release about 300 million gallons of treated wastewater into the bay. And with that comes nitrogen. And the nitrogen is important. All ecosystems need nitrogen for the functioning. All organisms need nitrogen. But when you have excess nitrogen, it can have an adverse effect on the environment.
Excess nitrogen lowers oxygen levels, which makes it impossible for sea life to survive.
The salt marshes are getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and we're losing about 40 acres to 50 acres of these salt marshes every year, and they provide, they're called nurseries. They take care of babies. You know, there are birds and fish and other types of animals that use these areas for habitat, for shelter, for raising their young, such as blue mussels, fiddler crabs, a variety of herons and egrets, and again, a variety of fish that make their home in those sheltered areas of the salt marsh.
Dr. Cernak's research is trying to prove whether or not oysters can help the water quality and increase much-needed vegetation.
There's been some interest in trying to determine if you can bring oysters back to New York. And part of the interest in bringing them back is that oysters can provide some important ecosystem services. So they can sort of enhance ecosystems. And the ways that they do that is, one is that when oysters grow, they tend to grow on top of each other, kind of like the way a coral reef is. And so it creates this like 3-dimensional structure, which essentially creates habitat and attracts other animals. And so it increases species diversity in systems, which is a good thing for the functioning of the ecosystem. And the other thing that oysters do is they can influence water quality. And this is something that has been studied quite a bit, particularly down in Chesapeake Bay and down in the Gulf of Mexico. What they do is they filter the water. They're filter feeders. And so the water, it might look dirty, it might look turbid, because there's just millions and millions of cells in the water per milliliters of water. Very high densities of these little cells of algae, which we call phytoplankton. And the oysters eat that. And so they'll suck in the water, filter out those particles, filter out those algae cells, and sort of clarify the water a bit. So that in itself can improve the clarity of the water.
There are so little areas, green areas left in New York City, that New Yorkers need places like this to enjoy with their families, with their friends, as well as coming out in school groups so that they can learn about how they can protect and preserve these areas.
The best time to visit and hike the trails of this wildlife sanctuary is in the mornings or in the fall. when the weather is cooler and many birds are stopping by as they migrate south. For Science and You, I am Marlene Peralta.
I'm Mike Gilliam for Science and You. Now, the dog days of summer are upon us, and when it gets hot, people in and around New York City like to cool off out on the water. One group is trying to make sure that the waters are clean for generations to come. The group is called Going Coastal, and they're preaching something called green boating.
It's beautiful on the water.
The people at Going Coastal are on a mission when it comes to the waters in and around New York City.
We are actually an educational group and environmental group. We create guides to the New York City's waterfront and other urban waterfronts. We want to let people know where to access the water, how to access it, and how to use it in the correct, appropriate way.
And that means disposing of sewage generated by recreational boaters into sewers, not directly into the waters. So they've secured grants and donations and launched this new pump-out boat that will work the waters of western Long Island Sound and Eastchester Bay, including Throgs Neck and City Island in the Bronx, where on hot summer days, people play in the sun and water.
We actually wanted to be a part of it, to do something to clean the environment. And we wanted to have a pump-out boat, so it took about 5 years to very extensive work to get the money together, to buy the boat. And then we were lucky enough to work with Kingsborough Community College, and they provided those incredible guys for us to work with, and we are in the water. We're doing it.
In the past, boaters had dumped raw sewage into the waters if they couldn't get to a pump-out facility or boat.
I'm just going to walk you, bring me right here, and I'm going to walk you in.
Now, the not-for-profit Going Coastal boat comes to marinas and boats that are anchored and relieves them of their waste free of charge.
I got a feeling, a lot of people would discharge because of the amount of money they got to spend on fuel and the distance they got to travel. So this will cause a lot of people to use the boats now. We need this water clean. It makes so much difference, for the fish that people are fishing and eating, and for the swimming. You go out there a day like today when it's so hot, you want to go in the water. You don't want to see stuff in the water and not want to go in, You get to enjoy the water more when you see it clean.
How do they react when they see this little boat come up to a marina?
Well, they can't believe it, first of all. They're like, they look at us like we're angels. We fell out the sky because they said they weren't able to receive these services earlier. And so they're really happy to see us out here.
The organization also offers information on kayak trails around the city, guides on what fish from local waters are safe to eat and in what amounts, and fishing line recycling bins aimed at keeping the lines out of the water and off beaches where they can injure birds, fish, and pets.
Fishermen discharge their fishing line there, and then we send it off to a place that creates actually fish habitat. So instead of it being a nuisance, now all of a sudden it's a raw material to create fish habitat, to make more fish, to make the environment better.
What are you saying to boaters?
I'm saying to boaters, we're making as convenient as possible for you guys to keep our waters clean, to discharge your sewage in a correct and proper manner.
So the marine companies say they're doing their part by helping to keep the water clean. And the environmental groups say they're chipping in and helping to clean up the water. All anyone asks is that if you come out, you do your part as well. Don't litter. Save these waters for generations to come. I'm Mike Gilliam for Science and You.
You want to be a big guy?
Yeah. In Brooklyn, fish are tough.
Look at them smiling. Brooklyn fish. Macho fish. Here, guys.
And when these environmentally friendly farmed fish reach your dinner plate, they're delicious.
These are tilapia. They are ready for market size. They're about 2 pounds. I was being nice, guys.
Meet Dr. Martin Schreibman.
You want me to put my Speedo on?
Distinguished Professor Emeritus of Biology at Brooklyn College and Founder and Director Emeritus of Brooklyn College's Aquatic Research and Environmental Assessment Center.
$2.5 million research and development center that studies aquatic organisms, learns about what's going on in the environment, in our aquatic environment. Jamaica Bay, Hudson River, all of those bodies of water.
And while Dr. Schreibman and his staff conduct cool research into things like turning algae into biofuel, his fission mission is promoting urban aquaculture.
Recirculating aquaculture systems, the state-of-the-art, which provides us a new technology for growing a lot of fish in a limited area, land-based, urban farming, fish farming, where we can provide a product to the community close at hand. We are trying to answer the questions of sustainability, of providing a different kind of food other than using fish to feed fish. They receive no antibiotics, no hormones, and we're able to market a product in 6.5 to 7 months, which is incredible. I think we've reached the stage now where the technology has been so developed that we are, that our investment people, venture capitalists, are beginning to listen to us.
And if you don't like tilapia, the system can be easily converted to grow sea bass, flounder, walleye, rainbow trout.
Can I be a member?
Our borough president does not like tilapia, but we're going to grow sole for him. Dover sole, Marty. Brooklyn water is actually excellent for growing fish as well as for baking bagels. I'm a thorn in the side of seafood restaurants, and I do the same thing in the supermarkets. You go to a restaurant, you ask the waiter, where did this fish I ordered, where does it come from? I'll ask the chef. Comes back a few minutes later. He buys it from Murray on Canal Street. So where does Murray get it? You know, he gets it from Taiwan. He gets it from wherever, Panama, wherever. What a shame that we're subsidizing other countries to grow products that we buy back from them. When we're trying to create jobs, we're trying to stimulate our economy, and we're this. I don't understand this. I know I'm only a biologist, but I don't understand this form of economy. The technology that we're using here, these are closed systems as opposed to open ocean aquaculture. These guys are fed all day long. They're in clean water, unpolluted, no mercury, and I've never found a hypodermic here or E. coli. But certainly, farm fish are healthy, they're nutritious, and the only way to go, guys.
Ariak is not permitted to sell its tilapia, but they're happy to give it away. Homeless shelters are the major beneficiary. And what's a seafood dinner without a vegetable? That's where hydroponics comes in. Growing plants in nutrient-fortified water without the use of soil. Today, red peppers.
Oh my goodness, this is delicious. $2 a pound for you. Aquaponics. The plants derive nutrient material from the fish waste, and the fish get their clean water back. It just does my heart good to think that we can address so many of the problems of the world as far as famine and food production and water quality and availability, when we can do it based on the research that we're doing here at Brooklyn College. And this makes me feel good.
Not just a fishtail.
It's not just a fishtail. You said that for the halibut, I know.
Barry Mitchell, Science and You.
I'm Grant Greenberg for Science and You. With gas flirting with $5 a gallon, we're all looking at ways to save money and decrease our dependency on foreign oil. Well, electric cars are becoming a more viable and affordable option, like the Prius over here, and batteries are making a big difference in other areas too. The government says Americans use nearly 140 billion gallons of gas a year. That's billions, with nearly 60% of that coming from foreign countries. So that pain you feel at the pump is a problem that doesn't appear to be going away anytime soon. One possible solution may be as simple as plugging in. That's what the MTA is doing. Batteries power a quarter of New York City's 6,200 buses.
They're good on emissions, good on fuel economy.
Gary LaBeouf is in charge of New York City's hybrid bus program. The MTA purchased their first prototype in 1996 and began using them regularly on routes about 5 years ago. A diesel engine charges the batteries. They're under the white bubble on the roof. Then those batteries power the motor to turn the wheels. The buses aren't fully electric, but LaBeouf says this is an important step to putting the brakes on pollution.
Now, we burn 55 million gallons of diesel fuel a year, so we could be or had been in the past a fairly substantial polluter. We aren't now.
These two banks of batteries are large enough to run a hybrid car.
CUNY professor Sanjoy Banerjee is working to weed us off gas and oil. In the time it takes you to watch this story, Energy experts say the U.S. will consume more than 500,000 gallons of gas. That's a lot of emissions being released. Environmentalists say motor vehicles are the biggest contributor to ozone pollution. The American Lung Association even blames car emissions for contributing to health problems that kill tens of thousands of people a year. Banerjee says the solution is building better batteries that store more energy and last longer. Here's a quick look at how batteries work. Each battery is essentially a small power plant that converts chemical reactions into electrical energy. Right now, batteries can only handle a limited number of reactions before they stop producing electrical energy and need to be thrown away.
You can think of this as like a little chemical plant now. Okay, and that conditioning allows us to extend the lifetime of this battery by a factor of 10. So instead of getting 300 or 400 cycles out of a battery, which is typical, we can get 3,000 or 4,000.
That's the goal of the research going on in Banerjee's own little chemical plant. He and his students are working on ways to bring down the size and cost of batteries while increasing their strength and length of time they last. Companies like GM and Nissan are now releasing fully electric vehicles that don't require any gas to run and release zero emissions. You simply plug them in at home. Banerjee says the concern is they only get about 100 miles per charge, although charging stations are starting to show up in cities across America. The base price for these electric cars is about $25,000.
It'll take, I would say, something like 5 years before you see a lot of plug-in hybrid cars. The sun doesn't necessarily shine when you need the power, and the wind does not necessarily blow when you need it. And we are not going to change our habits to suit the sun. We need lights when the sun goes down.
Banerjee believes battery power is the way of the future and predicts it will be about a decade before we start seeing battery-powered homes. He hopes each reaction here will reduce the time it takes to see even more hybrids on the road, saying batteries are the best way to steer clear of pollution and foreign oil. I'm Grant Greenberg for Science and You.
I'm Lisa Beth Kovitz for Science and You. Today, we're going to pay a visit to the BioBus, a mobile biology lab packed into a big yellow school bus.
Come on in.
The bus is virtually carbon neutral. Solar panels cover the entire roof, while a wind turbine also creates electricity. The engine runs on grease, and Ben collects fuel for the bus from restaurant waste. The excitement of using high-caliber research-grade equipment helps turn young kids onto science.
Let's name our body parts. What's that? You can shout it out. Eye, right? Okay, good. What are these things? Antenna, good.
I've always wondered what is really in a kiss.
We can definitely look at that.
Let's take a look.
Well, I think we're seeing two things here. The first thing is your lip print. The second thing we're seeing is actually your fingerprint.
Because I pressed it in, yeah.
So a fingerprint is, usually we think of as just the lines, right, that are the raised ridges on your fingers. And it's interesting because those fingerprints aren't actually for the police, they're actually for us to be able to grab onto things. They're almost like grip tape on our fingers. Oh, down here we can really nicely see that just like your fingers, your lips are also ridged, right? They have lines and raised areas. Right? They're not just a flat piece of skin. And if we move over here, we can start to see hints of what might be individual cells. Now, if we really want to see those cells clearly, we need to go to a more powerful microscope.
Let's go to a more powerful microscope.
All right, let's do it. That blob there, if you look at it, you can see that there's a little bit of a difference between this shape and these shapes around here.
Sure. That's the difference between the oil blob and the me blob.
Right, exactly. So the oil is homogeneous, right? Whereas the cell has the membrane on the outside, and then inside of that membrane are all sorts of interesting things like the nucleus and the ribosomes and all mitochondria. Now, if we zoom in, we might be able to start seeing some of those.
Let's see what we got.
All right. So we're going from 100 times magnification up to 200 times magnification. And let's go even higher. Let's go from 200 times magnification to 400 times magnification.
And that's what's in my kiss. Well, it's kind of neat and it's kind of gross.
Yeah, it is, right? But I don't think it's going to stop anybody from kissing.
I should hope not. From the BioBus, this has been Lisa Beth Kovitz for Science and You.
That's our show for today. Thanks for joining us. I'm Mike Gilliam. See you next time on Science and You.